social media sites. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. On behalf of Strategic Vision Institute, I welcome you all at our latest webinar on the historical, humanitarian, and political perspective of Kashmir issue. Before we proceed further, I would like to mention that this webinar will be conducted in the form of a panel discussion, during which each speaker will be given 15 minutes. If anyone is having trouble hearing or viewing the webinar or is having any form of connectivity issues, please do mention this in the chat and we shall try our best to address these issues from our end. Kindly note that by default, mics of all the attendees will be on mute and only panelists will be allowed to use mic and video. If anyone from the audience would like to ask a question, they are requested to kindly use the Q&A option. While we fully encourage you to participate, we request you to please brief in your questions. We shall try our best that all questions get answered within our allotted time. Please further note that all the opinions voiced as the SVI platform are independent opinions of the speaker and the audiences and do not reflect the official policy of the SVI. This is an open house activity which will be reported in media. This session will be live streamed on our Facebook. The full recording of the webinar will be available on our official website and YouTube channel of the SVI. If anyone would like to tag or post screen grabs of our event, please do mention that the event was conducted by the organized by the SVI. Well, every year Pakistan observes the Kashmir Solidarity Day on February 5th. The purpose of which is to reaffirm Pakistan's unshakable resolve for Kashmir cause. So today, SVI has organized a webinar on historical, humanitarian, and political perspective of Kashmir issue. Firstly, I would like to invite Mr. President and the Executive Director of the SVI, Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema, to give his welcome and introductory remarks. Sir, please.
Thank you, Amber. On behalf of the SVI and my own behalf, I welcome all the distinguished panelists to the SVI webinar on historical, humanitarian, and political perspective of the Kashmir issue. I'm very glad, I'm very thankful to the distinguished panelists that they have found time out of their very busy schedule and afforded to be available for this webinar. As Amber has said, and as we all know, that 5th of February is commemorated as a Kashmir Solidarity Day, on which all national organizations which have relevance to the Kashmir try to, in fact, the very government and the state of Pakistan commemorate the Solidarity Day with the Kashmiri people. The Kashmir dispute has many angles, as the title says, humanitarian, historical, and political perspectives. It's not just a territorial dispute. It's basically an issue on the right of self-determination of the people of Kashmir, which has been promised to them in the United Nations resolution. So this has been promised to the Kashmiri people in the United Nations Security Council resolutions, to which India has agreed to abide by, but unfortunately has not done that in the last 70 years of our independence since 1947-48. Since then, Kashmir has gradually become a very festering issue between India and Pakistan, on which we have fought a couple of wars and limited conflicts like Kargil. And even then, India is adamant about holding the promised plebiscite and give the due rights. Since the coming of the Modi's government, and even earlier than that, the Kashmiri people have been subjected to worst kind of barbarian and totalitarian attitude by the government of India. In fact, nowadays there is a talking of a genocide being committed on the people of Kashmir by the Indian government. There is a more than density of per capita soldier in India and the Kashmir Indian held Kashmir than anywhere in the world. So I think that's quite a matter of shame for the Modi government and the government of India as well. So we had been commemorating this day since long time, and we have been highlighting the importance, especially the atrocities committed against the people of Pakistan, the pellet guns, the use of pellet guns.
Sir, please unmute.
I've been muted since then.
Yes. No, sir. Sir, abhi aap Yes, sir, please.
So we are commemorating this day for the people of Kashmir and for the fundamental rights of the people of Kashmir, and for them to be honored with the right of plebiscite. They can choose their own fate, whether they belong to India or they belong to Pakistan, or even considering that they want to be independent. There is a small historical perspective, which we know that when India and Pakistan became independent in August 1947, the princely states, which were about more than 300-400 perhaps, were given a right of choosing whom they should join, whether they would like to be independent, or they like to join India, or they like to join Pakistan. The British, in a very indecent haste, did not decide who should exercise this right of choice, whether it should be people of that state or whether it should be the Maharajas, the kings, the prime ministers and the rulers of that state. But what India did is India unfortunately and blatantly used a very diametrically opposite principles on two princely states. On Kashmir, they decided that the Maharaja of Kashmir is the legitimate authority to decide where should Kashmir belong, with India or with Pakistan. And in Junagadh and in other places, they decided whether the people of Junagadh decide whether they want to do, instead of the Muslim ruler who wanted to join Pakistan. So since then, unfortunately, it's a very unfortunate history for the people of Kashmir, and they have suffered very badly because of the totalitarian, authoritarian, the genocidal, and the worst kind of treatment can be meted out, that can be meted out to human beings, has been meted out to the people of Kashmir. So Kashmir has now assumed an international status, and that is to be decided according to the wishes of the people of Kashmir. I'm very grateful to the honorable panelists who have agreed to find time out of their very busy schedule. So I refer back to Amber. Please introduce the chief guest, Lieutenant General. Let me, if I don't mislead him. Lieutenant General Masood Aslam. Kindly introduce the chief guest and ask him to deliver the chief guest address.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. The honorable chief guest for today's webinar is Lieutenant General Masood Aslam. Lieutenant General Masood Aslam, Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military, Sitara-e-Jurat, was commissioned in one of the oldest regiments of Pakistan Army in November 1971. He held various command and staff appointments during his career, including commanding a brigade during Kargil operations and a division along LOC during the 2001 standoff. He commanded the Peshawar Corps from 2007 to 2010 and oversaw all military operations in FATA in KPK during his period. He was later posted as Pakistan's ambassador to Mexico from June 2011 till 2013. He remains actively involved with numerous think tanks in Pakistan and abroad. He has special expertise in countering militancy, violent extremism, and undertaking rehabilitative measures to ensure lasting peace. Sir Journal Harun Aslam, I would like you to please give your remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Amber. Masood Aslam. Okay. Thanks a lot for those kind words. And I would like to thank Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema Saab for always giving me an opportunity to come and express my views. And I think this is a very important subject, as we all understand and we consider. At least we claim this to be the jugular of vein of Pakistan. And every year, as he highlighted, on the 5th of February, we celebrate a Solidarity Day with the Kashmiris. And then again, sometimes around the year, on one occasion or the other, whether it is because of our Independence Day or something, where we again remind the world or remind ourselves that there is some unfinished agenda which we keep referring to. And I think we have a very list of very learned speakers today, and I'm sure we'll all benefit from their wisdom. And however, before I go a little more forward on the subject, let me digress a little and raise a few queries, which I think I'm looking forward to as answers from this seminar, because I don't think this seminar should purely be an academic exercise. It must lead us forward. But before we lead, we are led forward towards the attainment of any objective. I think we need to look at it. Where are our shortcomings, and why something is happening and we are not really being able to make any headway over the last 74.5 years. So I would say that, you see, first of all, the ground situation today is totally changed. Post 5th of August 2019, we used to call Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is part of the Union. Ladakh has been separated. Jammu has been separated. Valley is separate. No, these are, that's a total different scenario. However, at the same time, by doing all that, the last year's action of on the Sino-Indian border in Ladakh have brought in a new dimension. So, have we actually utilized the involvement of China into this? Have been able to really capitalize the availability of the Chinese forum at the international level or the Chinese support at the international forum to really put across to the world that this issue or this dispute, which is lingering on for the last 74 years, needs to be really focused on by the world. On the humanitarian side, I look at it that despite so much of state-sponsored terrorism in the illegally occupied Kashmir, atrocities which Dr. Cheema was also referring to, and the cases of human rights violations, one doesn't see any let-off. Even just I was looking at some of the figures in the last month, in the month of January, there have been which have been actually documented, and the evidence is available. There are cases of local civilians being killed by the law enforcement agencies. As 25 have been illegally arrested, not even being allowed any legal recourse. 19 are are recorded as injured by firing. The cases of gunfights have been 12. The coordinate search operations have been 16. There have been houses which have been totally damaged in the last 1 month, or 13. And all this, what I'm saying, the internet blackouts, all this is happening over there. But somehow, neither the world is acknowledging it, nor any action is taking place. So why? Why is it that the Indian narrative is still being accepted in the free world? But if we just simply keep saying this thing, that we term it that it is because of the economic and the corporate interest of the West, well, then we need to review our own efforts. Do we really have a unified plan, a blueprint, some timelines, what we want to do? Who is coordinating these efforts? In government of Pakistan, in the civil society, in the academia, or is it the diaspora, or everybody is doing independently? Recently, only a month and a half back, a case by a British UK firm, which is known, which is Stoke Law firm and Stoke White firm, and they started off last year a special unit on war crimes. That unit has documented and has actually lodged a case in Britain against the Indian Army chief as to be tried as a war criminal. I'm sorry to say, we don't hear of it on our social media. We don't hear of it on our print or electronic media. The academia need to also look at, and at least for Pakistanis, we have to review the Karachi Agreement. Very few people discuss that point, the Karachi Agreement. And why is it important today? Because that Karachi Agreement was signed by the government of Pakistan with the government of Azad Kashmir, and it gave them an option to review their status once the overall dispute will be decided. So, to me, when I look at it, I see the shortcomings which we have is that there is no clear-cut policy or a blueprint available at the government level or even at a private level. The effort to galvanize the support of entire Kashmiri and Pakistani diaspora is limited. The existing consensus across political divide on Kashmir has not really been exploited. We have not even tried to put the entire country onto one platform and to work out where we want to move forward. The social media and electronic media somehow we need to really look into. And in this case, I would just again refer to three incidents. Mr. Ghulam Nabi Fire was considered to be a most leading activist on Kashmir in United States. The Indians managed to discredit him and blacklist him as a lobbyist who is a paid lobbyist of the intelligences of Pakistan. So why has it happened? Number two, even very recently, Sardar Masood Khan has been nominated by the Pakistan government as the ambassador to Washington. The gentleman has been in foreign service, has been representing Pakistan, has been over there in the United Nations, or permanent representative. But today, at this point, once he has been the president of Azad Kashmir and is going back to represent Pakistan over there in Washington, there have been questions being raised by the American Congress. Who is sponsoring it? We all understand it. Why can't we cater for it? We need to look into it. The third case, good or bad, I don't want to defend anybody, but Lord Nazir was the face of the Kashmiri struggle in Britain. Where has he been brought to at the moment, and how will it have been affected? And on the 4th of February, a day before, the case has been finalized and he has been punished. So this is where we are, this is the challenges we are up against in the world. We simply can't say that, no, India is too big. No, we have to really look into it. So to me, the way forward is we have to give the civil society the lead. The social media, electronic media needs maximum projection of the atrocities, subjugation of the Indian, of the Kashmiri Muslims, and as well as highlight the war crimes which are being documented by the Kashmiri diaspora the world over. Kashmiri leadership across the globe must be brought on one platform. Unless we bring them on one platform, our word will not, or our voice will not be heard. Maximum legal cases must be registered in United Kingdom, EU, and United States on human rights violations, and asking for sanctions against Indian military as well as the Indian government. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take your time because it's the speakers whom we are interested to listen to. I want to again thank Dr. Zafar Cheema for really providing us this opportunity to come and sit together, at least on the web. I expect a very lively question and answer session, and because we need to, the sole purpose is to identify how our case can be presented better, how India can be forced to give the Kashmiris their right of self-determination. At this time, I would also end with this thing, that the sense of fait accompli, which somehow sets in amongst our leadership and our intelligentsia, has to be removed. There is no fait accompli. We have to struggle. If we have not been able to succeed, we need to put in greater effort. We need to find greater new means and ways. And so that's where I expect my friends, my colleagues, and my sisters to really come forward. Thank you very much, Dr. Zafar Cheema Sahab, for holding this seminar, this webinar, and I look forward to listening to every one of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your invaluable remarks. Now, nextly, we are delighted and thankful to have a very distinguished panel for today's discussion. Now, let me introduce your distinguished panelists. Our first eminent speaker for today's webinar would be Dr. Salma Malik. Dr. Salma Malik is an assistant professor at the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. She specializes in the areas of conflict and security studies and South Asian affairs. She is an alumnus of the Uppsala University, Sweden, the Asia Pacific Center for Strategic Studies, Hawaii, and visiting research fellow, Sandy National Labs, New Mexico, USA. Besides being a member of IISS London, she is a part of various think tanks such as Regional Center for Strategic Studies, Consortium for South Asian Think Tanks, Social Sciences Research Council, MISCOM, NWD, and USA. Prior to joining KAUAU, she worked as a research officer at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, Pakistan from June 1996 to August 1999. Her publications include an edited volume, Pakistan's Security Problems and Challenges in the Next Decade, October 2015. RCSS Policy Studies titled Small Arms and Security Debate in South Asia. USIP co-authored study on mapping conflict trends in Pakistan. Besides various articles in research journals, book chapters, and monthly columns. Today, she will be speaking on historical background and evolution of the Kashmir dispute. Our second distinguished speaker for today's webinar would be Ambassador Arif Kamal. Ambassador Arif Kamal is a senior former diplomat of Pakistan. He moved from an academic environment focused in politics in the early 1970s to the diplomatic arena across the globe over a career spanning over 33 years. During these 3 decades with the Pakistani Foreign Service, Ambassador Kamal has played a key role in Pakistan's mission at various historic junctures in Tehran, Moscow, Ottawa, Tokyo, Jeddah, Doha, and Oman. Recently, he has remained the Director of Global Studies at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Research and Analysis, ISRA, National Defense University, Islamabad. Today, due to some issues, he is not able to join us, but his daughter, Miss Maryam Kamal, will deliver remarks on his behalf. The topic on which he'll deliberate is impeding humanitarian crisis in Kashmir. The third distinguished speaker for today's webinar would be Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi. Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi, Hilal Imtiaz Military, was commissioned in 1974 and joined Corps of Engineers in Pakistan Army. He has served in various command assignments as Commander Engineers, GOC, and Corps Commander. He also has served in staff as Deputy Engineer-in-Chief and Director General Staff Duties at GHQ. After graduating from Military College of Engineering, Command and Staff College, Quetta, and National Defense University, he also remained on the faculty of all three prestigious institutions. He also holds master's degree in international relations. He has attended finance-related short courses at Columbia University, USA, and INSEAD, France. He has served as Secretary Defense for a short tenure and later served as a successful CEO and MD of a leading corporate organization. Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodhi was also appointed as Defense Minister in an interim setup. He is presently a freelance writer and an eminent defense analyst. Today, he will be deliberating on evaluating Pakistan's political and diplomatic stance since the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. Now, I would like to call Dr. Salma Malik to please deliver her insightful remarks, please. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Amber, for your kind introduction. I'm extremely grateful. And I'm also grateful to Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema, my first boss, my HOD when I did my master's. And it's an extreme honor to represent DSS from this particular forum. The topic that you have assigned to me to talk about was historical background and evolution of Kashmir dispute. And I think for today's generation, it is extremely important for us to understand what the historical dimensions of extremely complex and protracted conflicts such as Jammu and Kashmir is all about. Because as General Masood Aslam in his opening remarks stated, that over the decades, Kashmir has taken a very, very different turn, and there are a lot of things that are happening in Kashmir which are not the way it was in the initial decades or in the initial years. And this transformation, for positive or negative, has unfortunately made the resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir problem extremely problematic. Not only have there been different actors involved, there has been a transformation in the role and characters of the actors, the factors and the environment that surrounds Kashmir, and so many other things which technically make this entire enterprise a complicated thing. However, as a teacher, when I look at or when I discuss Jammu and Kashmir with my students, where they are familiar with what Jammu and Kashmir is, that is all their surface knowledge, unfortunately, is about. A lot of times what we see is that they would know the key factors, they might be aware of the key terminologies, but they are not really aware of the actual story behind those behind those figures that they're talking about. For several of them, Jammu and Kashmir, courtesy Modi and his Hindutva politics, technically started as of 2019, 5th August. And I think in a very macabre manner, we should thank Modi for somehow reinvigorating the spirit of Jammu and Kashmir for the Pakistanis and for several other people who actually felt fatigued. I'm very sorry to use this controversial terminology when the name of Jammu and Kashmir and the long struggle, very tragic struggle of the Kashmiris was brought up, and they would say, what are we talking about? We have talked about this notion several times. But unfortunately, when we actually talk to them, they don't really know what is happening behind these bold facts and figures. So why do we need a historical discourse? Why do we need to understand the history? We need to understand the history, A, to learn the correct facts of history. to find out what exactly happened. Because in today's world, where social media has made actual reality, turned the actual reality into a virtual reality, and there's a lot of re-narration of facts and figures, there is a very, very strong and urgent and concerted need, especially for Pakistan, to document the correct version of history, the Pakistani version of history, the Jammu and Kashmiri version of history, where we find out, even if the history is painful, even if it also documents any of the mistakes that we made intentionally or unintentionally, but we need to find out what exactly happened over the several years. Our students don't even know what UNSCR resolutions are all about or how many resolutions that there were. They also don't know why those resolutions came about, what is the strength and the legality of this entire discourse. So these things need to be understood. There's also a need, more so now than ever before, when especially India is hell-bent on totally changing the course of history of Jammu and Kashmir. And how do you change the course of history? There are several ways that you can change the course of history. The older generation, which verbally narrated the history, dies down or is no longer available. They either are eliminated through natural selection, unfortunately, or they are killed by oppressive forces. And India is doing both. India has time at its hand, and it's very, very aptly allowing that older generation to sink away so that there is no one to tell the correct course of history or the atrocities that the Muslims, especially of Jammu and Kashmir, faced. The other way of doing that is through writing, through curriculum, through textbook writing, through popular writing, through academic writing, research articles. And again, we see, and we are all a witness to this factor, that in case of Jammu and Kashmir, the volume, rather I would say actually in case of South Asia, the volume of literature that is coming out from India is far greater than the volume of literature that comes out from Pakistan. One factor, of course, is that there's a huge number of Indians who are into writing. And in Pakistan, the culture of writing is not so much ingrained. Yet, even if it were, the sheer number of those who would write on these issues are naturally less than the number who are writing in India. The third factor, of course, is where you change the course of history by changing the cultural, architectural, archaeological history of that place. And that is what we are seeing, starting from Babri Masjid, going all the way to any of those old artifacts in Jammu and Kashmir, even the Hazrat Bal Masjid and various other historical places are being claimed or reclaimed, quote unquote, by India as Hindu spaces, which were distorted by the Muslims, and now they're claiming them back. They're re-saffronizing them. So say 10 years from now, there's going to be a very different Jammu and Kashmir, where this old historical legacy of what the Muslim dynasty of Jammu and Kashmir was all about is unfortunately going to suffer a major setback unless and until this discourse on history is made very clear. And also to undo the confusion and the grayness that we all have, not only the youth, but even people my generation and much older than them, who don't really know beyond surface knowledge of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, starting with a very cliched statement, the Jammu and Kashmir problem is one of the oldest UN Security Council agendas. Starting as of 1947-48, the Jammu and Kashmir problem had been tabled by India on the UN Security Council. And that was also a kind of a time-buying technique of Jawaharlal Nehru, who was a very astute politician and a diplomat, and who was very well versed in these legalities. In fact, lawfaring was one of his favorite aspects. And it's interesting to see that when this thing particularly happened, what was the history behind it? Why did the 1948 war take place? We usually blame that, oh, the tribesmen from Pakistan went to India and that created a lot of racket and a lot of ruckus, and they shouldn't have done that. Things were getting better. But the real fact is that this particular aspect starts as of 3rd June 1947, when the partition plan was being announced by the British. And at the same time, the Maharaja of Kashmir at that time, Hari Singh, who was a Dokra Hindu ruler, not a Sikh ruler, kindly do take that into account, was asked to decide as to which state would which of the dominions, independent dominions, would Kashmir go to. Now, Kashmir was part of that accession formula that was given to the 550 odd princely states that covered 40% of the land territory of the entire British colonial India, having a population of 23% of the total strength of British colonial India. Several of these states were not only were as small as 25 square kilometer with 2,000 to 3,000 population, and they were as big as 200,000 square kilometer, as in case of Jammu and Kashmir, with nothing less than 4 million population in all. But the instrument of accession, which was offered to these princely states, technically had one aspect to it, which was you either join Pakistan or you join India, and there was no third option available at that time. So many times when we say that, oh, why couldn't the third option be exercised? There's a very legal aspect to that. And this is the precise fact that there was no third option given. Now, over the decades, as our keynote speaker also said, that things have changed so much that we may consider thinking out of the box. We may consider thinking that if the binary is not working, let's go for any other option. But that only works out if all the stakeholders are honestly and truthfully contributing to the cause, and they genuinely are invested in a solution, not in a stalemate, which in case of India seems to be the case. So this accession was supposed to be either on geographical location, or plus it was also to be the decision of respective rulers, but with a caveat, and that caveat was that these respective rulers are going to decide in accordance with the will of the subject population. So whatever the subject, hence comes the notion of the plebiscite. So whatever the subject population would say, the ruler was supposed to abide by that. And that is precisely what did not happen in case of Jammu and Kashmir later on. Initially, when on the 3rd of June, 1947, the Maharaja, after figuring out as to where he should go and what he should do, he very conveniently signed or offered a standstill agreement to both the dominions, India and Pakistan, by saying that I need more time to decide which side to join. So that was kind of a third option that he was exercising. But this was an interim agreement till such time that he makes up his mind. Pakistan immediately warmed up to this notion, and they said that fair enough, you can go for whatever you feel like. And Christopher Snedden, who is an independent scholar, he said that Pakistan was, despite all the misgivings, Maharaja's preferred choice of the ruling monarch, the Maharaja of that time, that he should go there. And Pakistan also promised him as much autonomy as possible. Whereas the state of India, despite the Maharaja being a Hindu ruler, the state of India bought time for several reasons. Number one, they knew that not only the British machinery, colonial machinery, was at their side, and they would eventually do whatever they had to do. There was also this personal factor of Jawaharlal Nehru being a Jammu Kashmiri Pandit who never could see that his motherland would go to Pakistan. And he never really wanted this to happen. And his conversation with Sardar Patel, which has been documented by various Indian scholars, including A.G. Noorani and several others, and Mr. Naqvi, which actually says to the fact where they have shown his letters to Sardar Patel that do not allow such a thing to happen, and see to it that whatever the massacre may take place, Kashmir does not go to Pakistan. That's the last option available. And exercise whatever tools that you need to in this particular toolkit. Having said that, soon after the standstill agreement was signed between Maharaja of Kashmir and the Dominion of Pakistan, the Maharaja, on the other hand, unleashed a reign of terror against the Muslims, especially of Jammu area. Now, as we know, we technically think that it was only the valley of Kashmir that has a Muslim population. But at that time, the area comprising of Jammu, which had a sizable number of Hindu Brahmins, was not any less dominated or populated by the Muslims as well. So if the valley of Kashmir was, let's say, 90%, I'm not quoting the exact figures, but it was technically 90% Muslims. Jammu was also not an area where the Muslims were in single digits. Rather, they were in quite a huge number, 50 to 60% of the population group. It was only Ladakh where the number of Muslim residents was less. And technically, they could be called as a minority. Yet the fact was that Ladakh, being a Buddhist area, was also a place where there was a significant number of Muslims residing there. And there was this coexistence and harmony as much as it could happen, which actually eroded as of 1865 when the Dogra rule officially initiated in this entire Jammu and Kashmir valley. Now, the massacre that started immediately by the Maharaja was was a macabre affair. How it was macabre? That number one, he signed this agreement with Pakistan, providing Pakistan with this confidence that the Maharaja is at their side, or at least this problem is settled. And between 1947, June 3rd, to August 1947, 14th August 1947, the Muslim League and others felt that things were going pretty fine with Jammu and Kashmir. And once the partition happens, things would work accordingly. But again, we also see that the cartography that was being charted out became problematic and controversial. And Jinnah had to finally agree to what was happening in the larger interest of the state of Pakistan. But also the fact that not only the Muslims, the common citizens, were pushed out of Jammu, there was also the RSS cadres that came from the rest of India, as well as the areas which now are Pakistan, with stories that there was large-scale massacre. And if you log on to Wikipedia, that is the grayness of information that I'm talking about. You would find under the Jammu massacre, the first mention of the Jammu Brahmins being killed by the Muslims, or the Hindus and Sikhs being killed by the Muslims in large number, in retaliation to which the Muslims of Kashmir and Muslims of Jammu were killed. However, this was not the fact. The Maharaja asked these people over, and the saffron brigades, they came and unleashed a reign of terror against the Muslims, not only killing a good 200,000 plus Muslims, but 500,000 were displaced. Women were raped, women were harassed, several war crimes were conducted, or genocidal activities were conducted. And this is not something which Pakistanis say out of passion or something. This has been documented by several people, including Horace Alexander, who was a British journalist, who wrote Inspector January 1948 about this particular massacre taking place, and also by Ved Bhasan, who was an Indian Kashmiri Indian residing in Jammu, witness to what was happening, and yet nothing really happened. And Ved Bhasan, before he passed away, gave this testimony in 2003 as to what had happened. But the very fact is that Nehru, Sardar Patel, and even Mountbatten played complete ignorance to this thing, so that maximum number of Muslims are displaced and pushed out of Jammu and Kashmir, and then they would do whatever they have to do. And finally, when the tribals, and that is when the tribals come to Jammu and Kashmir in aid of the Muslim brethren by seeing what had happened to them, and when that happens, they use that pretext to send in troops. But before sending in the troops, they make the Maharaja sign, or allegedly sign, the instrument of accession, not in Jammu, not in Kashmir, but in Shimla in October, as the date goes, and that was completely under duress. However, this instrument of accession was also a conditional instrument of accession, as Mountbatten had said. But when we look at when we look at the popular discourse, none of these things are mentioned in complete detail, and that is where things go wrong. Now, the Sangh Parivar's role in this demographic engineering is not something new. It is not something that has started as of 2019 or the 1990s. It is something that is happening in 1947. It is something that was happening a century ago, when in 1846 the Treaty of Amritsar was signed and the Dogra rule was instituted in Jammu and Kashmir. And that is where on you actually find a very systematic reign of human rights abuse, specifically against the Muslims of Jammu as well as Kashmir area or Kashmir Valley. And that is how things have worked out. Amber, kindly do let me know if I'm not overshooting my time so that I can conclude. I can talk.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm most grateful. So what we technically need to see here is, again, I go back to the fact as to the narration of history, that this is a pattern that the Indians technically have, or the Hindus technically have, of doing what they want to do with impunity, yet creating a situation in which the Muslims or Pakistan now is blamed for doing atrocities, for doing terrorism, for doing several other things, and getting away with it. The point that I mentioned earlier on was that Nehru not only was a good diplomat, India's diplomacy is its strength. And they used that diplomacy to the max. And that is what we have seen happening, not only in 1948, but also in 1971, and much later after 1990s, when they turned this legitimate struggle into an act of insurgency. And when we say insurgency, technically means that it is an internal activity, which technically means also that the lexicon that India uses, that this entire area is not a disputed area, but it's its own area where Pakistan is creating these problems. So what we need to realize is that the language that we use when we are talking about this extremely sensitive and complicated question of Jammu and Kashmir has to be the proper language. The lexicon has to be extremely proper. We also need to learn day by day, date by date, why these particular dates are important for us, what happened and where. Atrocities against women is not something that has happened after 2019. In fact, I would say after 2019, these atrocities have perhaps lessened a bit, although I can't say it with authority because there's a complete media blackout. But incidents such as what happened in Anantnag, Kunan Pushpura, so many other places where entire small cities comprising of Muslims of Kashmir had their women folk unfortunately dishonored in front of their men, is something which has a lot of evidence, but it is something that the Indians are not willing to entertain. The point that war crimes has been acknowledged against India and nothing is happening about it is also the strength of India's, not only India's diplomacy, but also its hybrid politics, where it is using political economy as well as diplomacy to its best to do what it has to do. Now, what do we technically need to realize or understand? And also another dimension to this is that when we are looking at the UN Security Council resolutions, which are 17 of them, the last being in 1971, we need to read the fine print and understand what all of these resolutions over the decades had said. Initially starting from the fact that only Pakistan needs to withdraw to peaceful ceasefire limits, to a time when it was decided to be done mutually. We need to understand that the UN has also judiciously understood the situation in Kashmir and tried to be as equitable about it as possible. Yet the very fact is that we always claim that it was Shimla that changed the entire dimension. Yes and no. I would contest this point because, and of course, Shimla has several dimensions to it. The fact that the Shimla Accord, when it was signed, no bilateral agreement can be signed between two countries that surpasses UN edicts or resolution on that particular issue. It is not superior to the UN resolutions. Yet India has, again, very vilely and very fascinatingly, in fact, it is interesting to see how India plays with words and changes the lexicon, the politics of lexicon that India uses, by saying that now the Jammu and Kashmir problem is to be resolved bilaterally. But bilateralism also had a certain caveat to that, and that caveat was that it would not surpass United Nations Security Council resolutions or decision on the disputed issue. And that is a selective narration by the Indians when they say that. And that is something that the Pakistanis have to be very careful about. Today, when we say that Jammu and Kashmir needs to be considered out of the box, we say that a third option should be open about it. We also need to understand that at some level, we are digressing from Pakistan's principal stand on Jammu and Kashmir problem. Yet, again I say, and I repeat what our keynoters mentioned, that it is pragmatic and prudent to understand that time has changed. A lot of time has changed. Yet the very fact is, in conclusion, I would say that the will and the vigor of the Jammu and Kashmir residents, the Muslims of Jammu and Kashmir, whom India has always mistakenly thought that these are people who are pacifist, these are people who believe in Sufism and Kashmiriyat, are now a generation who would die. The complete generation will wipe out, but not let India's domination rule over them, is a totally different story. We need to talk about Jammu and Kashmir. We need to spread out the message of Jammu and Kashmir by keeping this discourse of history, by becoming very wise about what Jammu and Kashmir is all about, and then talk to the international audience from a position of strength and not from a position of weakness. As Pakistanis, we need to be very, very confident that we are taking a moral stance, and that moral stance has a lot of strength to it. To my younger colleagues, my message is, please read online. There's a plethora of literature available on social narration of the Kashmir conflict by a range of Kashmiris, not only Muslims, but the Hindus, who are writing the right narration of Jammu and Kashmir. What is happening to the common people? What is happening to me in Jammu and Kashmir? What is happening to you people? How a youth day in Jammu and Kashmir is spent. How a teenager, from a toddler to a teenager, what is his journey? How they dodge the bullets. How they're killed, which is considered to be a very, very normal thing. And this is not normal. So we need to actually understand that from 1846 to date, the problem of Jammu and Kashmir does not start in 1947. It actually starts in 1846. And that is a very, very long history of tragedy that these Kashmiri residents are facing. Thank you so much, Dr. Cheema Saab, for giving me this time. And I'm extremely honored to present this particular aspect. God bless.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for making a very good presentation. Excellent. Amber, go on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your enlightening, awakening, and such invaluable remarks. Now I would like to call over the next speaker, Miss Maryam Kamal, who is from the British Council, Doha, to please shed some light on the impending humanitarian crisis on Kashmir on behalf of our worthy Ambassador Kamal. Ma'am, please, Maryam Kamal.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's quite an honor. The topic of Abu's, my father, Ambassador Arif Kamal's talk today is actually human dynamics in Kashmir, and he's written out his notes for me to read for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak at this webinar on behalf of my father, Ambassador Arif Kamal. Due to ill health this morning, he has been unable to share his thoughts himself. But I will read out what he has written for you. The human dynamics of an entity and its external prodding are indeed interwoven and therefore a subject of keen interest for everyone. This will have to be factored in any discussion on the Kashmir scenario that we undertake today. Nevertheless, we also need to keep in view that Kashmir is a unity in diversity, and its flanks do not necessarily act in tandem with its nucleus. Cross-border escape of humans has been more pronounced with the periphery and should be seen as fractional. Instead, mainstream Kashmiris excelled in layback or in home-based resistance. In 7 decades, Kashmir and Kashmiris moved from one to another posture in their own lake. They moved from passive resistance to militancy, and from there back to an expectant posture from the so-called India-Pakistan normalization. Turning the clock onwards, I see them fighting on their turf and face the music. Let us see Kashmiris outside the ambit of Punjab and Bengal. I see them as a people facing tests and trials on their own soil. Of course, this may herald trouble for external helpers from abroad and for wakils if they choose not to hibernate or take a backstage for the time being in view of world politics. Coming down to Saffron India's intent in the unfolding of the August 2019 action and what basically came in its following. In fact, the Saffron action was run on a 5-fold scenario that they perceived. The fault in Kashmiri existence, the identity as they espoused, and on their international personality as registered with the UNICIP. This is aimed at a body blow to the Kashmir cause, to the Kashmir case, as projected at the international forum. Indian posture moved from multilateral approaches to bilateralism, and from there, unilateral action, something akin to a superpower syndrome. The onslaught was undertaken as they perceived Pakistan at its lowest ebb, and therefore ready to fall in line with the unfinished Hindutva agenda. What are the instruments of change? The Balkanization and the West Bankanization? Best practices of Israel's action implanted on what we know of an old prescription, re-engineering at its best. In short, the Saffron wanted to bring to an end the Kashmir saga once and for all. The issue has a 3-sided response options. Firstly, the impact on Kashmiri regions and people. There is a broad rejection from all regions and peoples of the state. Of course, creeping silence in Chenab, where Hindus and Muslims intermingle, should not be mistaken. Voices from Skardu were in unison with voices in the valley. Similarly, the difference between the so-called mainstream and the so-called separatist diminished to an extent. Secondly, the response from the international community. The international community, by and large, is silent, more focused on the commercial interests or on preventing a war between competitors rather than giving support to Kashmir's self-determination. We have to eat this with a pinch of salt for the time being. Thirdly, Pakistan's stance. Given the human dynamics of the situation, our policy must factor the following. Acknowledge primacy of the Kashmiri people in a triangle of the dispute. Not act in kind with Indians, that is, policy fragmentation. Do our part in upholding Kashmiri primacy and their right to self-determination. De-emphasize notions of territoriality as against human dynamics and see the issue in its true colors of self-determination. So how do we give Kashmir, the Kashmiri existence a face? Not a face limited to the Indian side, but an all-encompassing space if we support a national liberation movement and one dedicated to post-colonial liberalization of the Kashmiris. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a good presentation.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your insightful remarks. Now, I would like to call our next worthy speaker, Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi, to give his input and valuable remarks on evaluating Pakistan's political and diplomatic stance since the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A. So, General Naeem Khalid Lodhi, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Saab, and thank you, SVI, and
welcome.
Very warm greetings to all the panelists and all those who are listening to us. It is a great, I think, occasion to actually say about Kashmir in these days, because we know that we've also just celebrated our Solidarity Day on 5th of February. A lot has been said on television and it has come in newspapers. So I think a very good base has been laid by Dr. Salma and the daughter of Kamal Saab. Good to listen to them. I've been asked to deliberate on the Pakistan's response as far as diplomacy and politics is concerned with regard to 370, abrogation of 370 and 35A. Rather than treating them separately, because although diplomacy is different and politics is different, but they are interrelated also. I would even go to say that politics is also related with the economy. That is why we call it political economy also. And especially once we see that India has used the economic clout for its political purposes. So what I intend doing is that I will be treating diplomacy, politics, economy, and even certain aspects of media together, where actually the basis would be our political responses and diplomatic responses, but how these could have been, you can say, enlarged or telescoped with the help of media and some economic aspects also. So to understand our own responses, I think we must first list down that what Indians did in these areas. Once BJP was preparing for the elections, the prior elections, they very openly, they were saying that they will resolve the Kashmir issue. And they were even giving timelines that they will resolve it within this much time. And that should have been a wake-up call for us, that a party which is coming into power with this premise, with you can say anti-Pakistan sentiments, and telling the people that they will resolve these issues, and Kashmir issue was one of those main things they were advocating. On that stride, they came into power, and even then we kept quiet, knowing very well that they have, succeeded in elections because of this. So actually, they were preparing, I would say, grounds politically before doing this 370-35A. Next, what happened was that once they were intending to do that, they started amassing a lot of troops in Indian-held Kashmir. And we just kept on watching, although we kept on saying that they are a threat for, our security. But we just overlooked the political aspect of it. That, what could be the reason that they are getting so many troops, inducting so many troops in Kashmir, and rather than, trying to see that what can happen politically, we kept on making noises that we just took it as something, military sort of thing, and that was a very limited, I think, response from our side. And then they went for it. I think these were the political steps which they actually took, abrogating the 370 and then the 35A. And later on nowadays, what they are doing is that we know that they are making demographic changes. They are giving, domiciles to non-Kashmiris in millions, and that is happening in front of us. They have asked some Middle Eastern countries to come and invest in Kashmir. So they are even using the economic ploy for the political ends. So these are the number of steps which they have taken diplomatically. Of course, they went for preventive matters. They went all over the world, telling people that we have done all this for the betterment of Kashmiris and this and that. And now they are trying to do things within Kashmir. For example, even they are trying to change the seats allocation within the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, giving more seats to Jammu and Kashmir and such like things. So they are continuously taking steps, concrete political steps, and to shroud them, they are very active diplomatically, using their economic clout. And I'm not talking about the military steps, because that is outside the scope of today's talk. So what have we done? I think we did all right as far as later on. We only responded. The first important thing to note is that we reacted. We only responded whatever they were doing, rather than preempting. As I said, that there were indicators that some things are going to happen, so we could have preempted also. So I think Imran Khan's speeches at various international forums, his very strong voice to spread this message that what is happening to the people of Kashmir. And we know, I'm not talking about the atrocities, and not talking about the military aspects, because that is understood. So he projected that very effectively. And I think Pakistan also prepared some dossiers, a bit of lawfare, I would say. But now a very important thing has happened, that from UK, a proper lawfare campaign has been launched against the Chief of Army Staff and other Indian Chief of Army Staff and others. So this way we have been doing all right. But because of our weak media, I would say, we have not been able to multiply these things. Those are happening, and especially we could not appeal to the civil society of the world, because just trying to impress the governments of the world is not enough, because the countries, as we all know, they always look after their interests, and their interests are normally economic in nature and political in nature. So they are not really worried that what happens to the people all around the globe. But the civil societies are worried. There are many platforms which could have been used. For that, you need a very potent your ambassadors and the active diaspora, and for that you need to use your embassies. I think we have been a bit weak as far as that thing is concerned. We were also successful in mobilizing UN Security Council, and there was a meeting. Of course, it was not a very formal discussion, but I think it did some damage to the Indian cause, but not to that extent. What we did not do, in my opinion, and what we need to do, I will talk about while talking about the political field, I will talk about the internal politics and also the international politics. Internally, we need to do two things, in my opinion. One is that there should be no dissenting noises as far as the Kashmir cause is concerned. This is our, one of the supreme national interests. So whether it is opposition or it is government, there should be no statements like, one side saying that Kashmir has been sold out, and the other side saying that nobody did anything about Kashmir and we are the first ones to doing it. Actually, both are wrong. Kashmir has not been sold out, one. And secondly, it is not only this government which has taken up the Kashmir cause, every government has done their bit. So I think they need to sit together and decide among themselves that as far as, the voices from within the country which are heard by international, civil society and the media and the governments, it need to be one voice. Secondly, I would suggest this is my personal suggestion, that we should not talk of any other option but our proper legal and moral stance that is anchored on UN Security Council resolution. If you have anything in your mind, we can discuss it once the table talks start, because otherwise also it is against the good negotiation skills to take a second defense line or a third defense line from the very outset. Why should we do it? Because it dilutes our own stance. So we should remain strongly anchored to the UN resolutions. And I don't think it was wise for a Prime Minister to say that we can also consider this and we can consider that. I mean, that should not be talked about at all, or anyone else. And this should also be a very strong and firm policy guideline for everyone, for all institutions, for media, that we will not leave the basis, the moral basis, our anchor, our legal basis on which the entire edifice of Kashmir dispute has been raised. Other things which we could have done, in my opinion, and some of them are controversial now, whatever I'm going to say. One, of course, is not controversial, that once we know that India is trying to make demographic changes, and it is very obvious that it can be proved, we should go to UN with the help of China or other friends, that immediate population census should be carried out in both parts of Kashmir, Indian occupied and the one with Pakistan. I think this is a very legitimate demand. This would be a very legitimate demand in view of what all is going on ground. I must also add that we must add China in a very strong way as one of the stakeholders as far as the Kashmir dispute is concerned. We must talk to them that they should raise their voices along with us, and I think we have a good chance of doing that. Okay, now coming on to the controversial things. I am of the opinion that we should demand a partial plebiscite from UN Security Council or UN, that wherever the plebiscite is possible, like Gilgit-Baltistan or Azad Kashmir or anywhere, wherever its law and order is all right and people are ready, and we can practically hold the plebiscite. It can be done under the auspices of UN, and you can ask the people what do they want. Now, naturally, India will oppose it, and maybe some of the big powers will veto it. So the next option with us is on this plebiscite, that we carry out the plebiscite ourselves under the observers, international observers. We call observers from all over the world, and the army should never be seen anywhere. They should go in the barracks, and a proper, neutral, transparent plebiscite should be held in Gilgit-Baltistan. Otherwise, also we are giving, we want to give provincial status to Gilgit-Baltistan. They are also demanding it. So why not do it through a method which is more enduring and which can help us in later on? And this whole process, and we can also do it in Azad Kashmir. This whole process should be known as partial plebiscite, to be extended to other areas whenever it is possible. The second, I think we could have done is that instituting a government in exile. Now, there are I know there are arguments against it, that because we have seats in Azad Kashmir Assembly for the people from occupied Kashmir, actually, you cannot actually adjust the people living in occupied Kashmir on these seats. And normally, those migrants who have been here till 60 years, 70 years, sitting in Gujranwala, Lahore, they get all these seats. This is not logical. I think if we have some, if we support a government in exile, it can be filled by the diaspora of Kashmiris living, actually belonging to occupied Kashmir area, and that would be more potent. It can be, sitting in some of the European countries, they will be able to spread the message in a much better manner. So that also, I think, is one of the things that we could be doing. We have never talked about similar agreement, whereas actually it has been, you can say it has been abrogated by India, because it says that the two sides will not make any change on political change on either of the sides, and they have done it, but we have never talked about it. I think we can always raise that issue. So I think initially what I've covered is that internally we must have one voice. At international level, we should not talk of any other choices except the UN Security Council resolutions. We should think of, about a similar agreement, whether it needs to be there because it has been violated anyway. We can talk of partial plebiscite. We can talk of government in exile. And there can be other, things also once, we have more discussion on this, more people get into this discussion, and maybe more options also come up. So I would say that Pakistani government has done all right, partially good enough as far as diplomacy is concerned. They haven't done enough at all as far as international politics is concerned, as far as internal politics is concerned. About Kashmir, and especially this point of trying to create the interest of China more than what is being exhibited, so that we make them a proper stakeholder as far as the Kashmir issue is concerned. And whenever we talk of arbitration, I would caution our leaders that please never accept the arbitration of America, because now they are very close and they have very deep relations with India. So at all, whenever we talk of arbitration on Kashmir, it should be a consortium of countries where China must be there, America can be there, and maybe Russia can be there, and Turkey and some other countries which are acceptable to both the countries. So all said and done, I would say that we have done, reasonably well in diplomacy, but not enough in the political arena, and I'm deliberately not talking about the military aspect, because I'm of the opinion that we can do a lot in that area also. But this international politics, internal politics, and diplomacy, whatever came to my mind, that whatever we have done, I have placed before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a very enlightened speech. We're very grateful. Kamal, I think we can now go into question and answer sessions.
Yes, sir. Since Vishal is not here, so we can avail this time, sir. Sir, we have questions from. So the first question is from Mr. Haris Bilal Malik. He is currently working at the Center of Aerospace and Security Studies, KAS Islamabad, and a former researcher at the SVI. He firstly praised and gave gratitude to all the worthy panelists and the SVI team. His question is to Lieutenant General Masood Aslam. He said, in my humble opinion, Pakistan fully acknowledges China's vision of economic integration with the rest of the world, including India. Given the current landscape of South Asia, China, based on its strong political and economic standing, can influence India to resolve the long-standing Kashmir issue with Pakistan. But unfortunately, despite China's all-out support for Pakistan's stance on Kashmir against the backdrop of India's August 2009 actions, this is not happening. Sir, what do you think? Is it only the geoeconomics factor that has dominated this prospect, or there are other factors as well? Sir General Masood Aslam, please.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you, Haris. I think let's not be so. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
sir.
I think let's not be so. I would say it's too simplistic a view to look at it that and expect that yes, of course, in India-China bilateral trade is more than $100 billion, but for China and especially for India, as far as the balance of trade is concerned, the exports from India are not that much that they should be so concerned or so influenced by the Chinese economic coercion if they want to do. Similarly, for China, a market of $70–80 billion is a big market, but not really. Secondly, we must understand that China doesn't react in a manner where we would like to say that it would stretch its influence where it becomes a standoff. Even when in its own case, in its own border disputes with India, it's only under the President Xi that we are seeing that it's taking that hard stance against India. Otherwise, still it is negotiated solutions they are looking forward to. They are supporting us at all international forums. Even during the recent visit, the issue of Kashmir was specifically mentioned. And not only it is China, but if Russia, if Putin also makes a mention to the Kashmir dispute while talking to our Prime Minister, it actually means that the Chinese are working indirectly in those areas where previously there was no support for Pakistan. So I think we need to further work with China, but to expect that China will be single-handedly able to coerce India to resolve this issue. First of all, let's see them resolving their own border disputes, and they start right from Ladakh and go down to Arunachal Pradesh. So therefore, it's quite a big thing on their plate themselves. So I don't think China will ever go to an extent that we will be able to have the Kashmir issue resolved just because of China's influence. It has to be the whole world which has to come up and really give the Kashmiris the options, as Jan Lodhi was highlighting. Those options will only be acceptable if the world starts really getting together. Thank you.
If I'm allowed to just say a few words about this, we also need to keep in mind that the Indian and Chinese standoff is being strengthened, and they are becoming more antagonist because of Indo-US nexus, which is going deeper and deeper, and also India being part of Quad plus this this region. So I think yes, maybe China is not at this time may not be going all out to support Pakistan, and that is also because of Pakistan's policy, which I think is not bad, that they don't want to fall totally in the lap of Chinese, because Chinese would love this if we go all out in support of China against Quad or against AUKUS or whatever is happening. Then probably they will be supporting us more closely. But I think Pakistan is pursuing a policy of prudence, where we don't want to, snap our relations with America and the West. So as long as we pursue that policy, we can only expect China, whatever they are doing. You must have noticed that in this last statement, which has come up after the visit of our Prime Minister, they have come out quite strongly in support of Pakistan as far as Kashmir is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. With due respect, Dr. Zafar Iqbal Cheema, Dr. Saif Malik has raised the hand, so can we take him live?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. Mujtaba, please update Dr. Saif Malik.
Okay, I will be noting you. Okay. Dr. Saif Malik, please speak.
Thank you. I hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. What a delight and what a treat to hear this such worthy panelists. They have come out, hardly there is anything which they have missed out. I will, prior to ask question, I would like just mention how to pursue UN to appoint a special envoy on Kashmir. This is, I think, the urgency requires and demand. Secondly, OIC also must appoint an envoy on Kashmir so that we can mobilize the world. Having said so, I fully subscribe to the ideas of General Lodhi. Sir, though GB people desire to join Pakistan, and same is the case, Kashmir banega Pakistan from AJK. So don't you think rather people raise this question, if we go for the partial plebiscite, it is counter argument is Pakistan's the legal position and the moral is going to be compromised. One. Secondly, may I ask Dr. Salma Malik as well, as the 5th of August 2019 as assault on the Kashmiri's identity, then how world use their leverage and the voices of conscience to put their pressure on Modi to return the statehood? How much is the possibility? And lastly, sir, demographic balance of the valley is terribly being disturbed because of the new domicile law. If parity comes, minority becomes majority, and majority, the Hindus, they join, then if UN is pursued by India, go for the plebiscite, then what will be the legal position of this? The second question is again from Dr. Salma Malik. Thank you very much.
Dr. Salma, please go ahead first.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saif. Going in reverse, I would say one thing that I strongly feel that India is going to once again actually ask for the plebiscite itself and actually hold the plebiscite and try to do some course correction. But that it will do from a position of strength when it has engineered enough demographic changes which are already underway. 2 years, it has made tremendous changes, not only in locating, dislocating, and relocating population groups from Kashmir, pushing people out and bringing people from the rest of India, settling them down there. They have also done constitutional efforts which have made these changes entirely possible. More than the 370 article, it was 35A, which paved this path for India to bring about all these changes. And that is very important. We keep lamenting about 370, and that is also this correction of history that we need to do, where we focus on 370, which is technically a lesser evil, and which we initially never agreed to, but the bigger problem lies in 35A. Having said that, your point is extremely important, that would it return to the old status? I think not only will India return it to the old status, it will also sort of go about holding the plebiscite. But on an alternate thought, I would also say that India might not restore the old status. Why should it restore the old status? Because it doesn't need to do that anymore. It's more like a land mafia going about doing whatever it has to do. And by that time, even when the plebiscite is held, this could also be part of the plebiscite, whether they want to revert to the pre-2019 situation or status or not. And the answer would be, of course, not, because if they revert to the pre-2019 status, that might also require them to restore 35A and several other things. So that is not going to happen. So these are two alternate realities. But what about the international voice of conscience as well as leverage? I personally feel that there is no international voice of conscience. It is all part of a larger politics that we all play. We have very selective way of looking at human rights, moral, ethics, voice of conscience. and we employ these tools as and how it suits us. So for the US, the plight of a small puppy, which they put on a table and choreographed a chemical weapon testing, when they had to find a justification to attack Afghanistan, is a big news. But people dying by the dozen in Kashmir or Palestine doesn't have any impact at all. So that is a problem.
Thank you, Dr. Saif. Partially the question has been answered that why do we ask for population census? That is well understood, because whatever is happening in occupied Kashmir, I think this demand is also legitimate. As far as partial plebiscite is concerned, it does not fall outside the ambit of UN resolutions. What I am suggesting is that you say that because the UN resolution is not totally possible for the time being, let us apply it partially wherever it is applicable. And I agree with you that the demand should come from the people. And I think the demand of Gilgit-Baltistan can very easily be contrived to, in a political sense, that they ask for that we are ready for the plebiscite and we want to give our view. And same voices can be raised in Kashmir also, Azad Kashmir. So I think it is doable, and it will not violate anything as long as you call it partial and you call it conditional. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I say something?
Yeah, please.
Dr. Saab, when we talk of 370 and 35A, I wish Dr. Salma would highlight to whatever I recall. Let me put across. Maybe she'll be able to put those things right. You see, 35A and 370, when the Indians abrogated it, 370 is a provisional clause in the Constitution, which allows a special status to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which was to be decided as per the UN resolutions. However, 35A was added in 1958, if I recall correctly, on the insistence of Sheikh Abdullah. Why is it called 35A? Because for the first time in 1935, the Kashmiris tried to re-establish their status. It is because in those days, the British Indian government had started bringing in people to work, as well as the government officials who were trying to take over the lands and property and become citizens of the state. And therefore, in 1935, the Maharaja gave a special status of who can be the citizen of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And in that, he laid down a figure, a date, a timeline of something 1874 or 76, when his great-grandfather had actually taken over the state from the Sikhs, when the Dogras became the rulers from the Sikhs. And 35A, it has a special clause. A clause is that a Kashmiri can marry outside the valley and bring back, and the woman will become a state citizen. However, if a woman Kashmiri marries outside the state, she cannot be, that person cannot own a property. She cannot ask for a property from her family, ancestral property also. So that means the women who would marry outside the state would lose the state citizenship as well as the right to own property. When Indians abrogated it in August 2019, they actually raised this point over there that we wanted to give the women folk equal right of ownership. And that's why because they were not allowed to gain property or to inherit properties from their families if they wanted to go outside and marry anyone. That has been abrogated. So this is how they try to justify to the rest of the world that they are bringing in greater things, and 370 and then the other thing. So we need to really counter this argument if we want to move forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan Saab.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we have the next question is from Ms. Adila Ahmed. She's a PhD scholar in the University of Lahore. Her question is to Journal Naeem Lodhi. Sir, please, with regard to latest news on real estate development by India, if more Indian people will buy property in near future, they can obviously overcome Kashmiri's population percentage. The worst outcome will be then that the Indians will allow UN plebiscite in Jammu and Kashmir. But then the scenario will be according to the will and interest of the Indian leadership. We can say that still UN resolution be relevant. Please, your take on this. Journal Naeem, Malik.
Thank you very much. I think in my own assessment, and I cannot insist on that because not enough knowledge is coming out from occupied Kashmir. I think the people would be reluctant to come and settle in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in the Kashmir Valley, because there is some resistance going on. Yes, today we have more than about 900,000 troops over there. That is why the things are under the lid. And still we find that, every second week, third week, there's an encounter, serious encounter between the forces and the resistant fighters. So what they are doing is that they are giving domiciles to military men, retired people who can come and settle there. So in my own assessment, it is going to take a lot of time to make big changes, big demographic changes and big social changes as far as the occupied Kashmir is concerned. However, yes, because they have taken that direction and they are going in that direction, we need to do something. I always keep saying that whatever India is doing to us, at least that much we have the right to pay back in the same coin. What was Kulbhushan doing here? What has happened in Balochistan in the last week? And Chinese have been attacked, and we all know that which country was behind all this. And we have been attacked via Afghanistan also, before this regime took over in India. Now it is happening. So this attitude of ours to remain in good books of the world, to be good boys, this will not work. This will be counterproductive for our own, honor and dignity, and also for the Kashmir cause. We need to shed away this aura of good boy, becoming good boys and all that. Of course, I'm not suggesting that we should start doing things openly, but being a retired general, I think I can take this liberty to reiterate that we need to be more aggressive in our stance about Kashmir, and this passivity and only being defensive is not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, the next question, Sir Fahim Malik has added to the Dr. Salma's point. He's saying another variation of alternate reality by Dr. Salma can be when India goes for a partial plebiscite asking continuation of Article 370 or reversal. It may also be determined that Kashmiris either live under abrogated 370 or renewed 370, but then impliedly consent to remaining under the Indian rule. Why can India not use that tactics?
Sorry, Amber, I was just reading the question. When India goes for a partial plebiscite. You see, the problem at the moment is that the Kashmiris are free to resist, and they're free to raise their voice and face India's oppression. But at the international level, and I would also couple Avushe's question and Zafar Saab's question in this as well about the support and what Pakistan can do about it. Since India has control over the territory, the occupied territory of Jammu and Kashmir on the Indian side, nothing much can happen. Except that we actually enter into a full-fledged war with them. India is not in a mood to listen to us. They're not in a mood to dialogue with us, or they're not even in a mood to trialogue. Consider that the Kashmiris are also an active stakeholder to the conflict. In fact, they are the main effectees and they are the main stakeholders to the conflict. So if they are not willing to do that, how are they going to actually listen to the aspirations or the will of the Kashmiris, or even go by the legal lawfare question to it? Now that they have the Modi government, and minded this is something that I said earlier on as well, don't consider that this anti-Muslim annexing Kashmir strategy is something which is the forte of the Saffron Brigade, Modi and his cahoots. This was something which was very much in action by the Congress leadership as well. In fact, Nehru was the first to actually put Kashmir in this particular limbo and this controversial status. It is just that they have had more guts and courage to totally violate and blatantly go about doing what they did. And by the time the Modi government or the Saffron Brigade is out of power in India, it is going to be quite some time. And by that time frame, they would have brought about so many changes in the constitution, the legal framework, the demography, the rules that go by it. The point that General Masood Aslam Sahab was mentioning about how they have changed the entire narration, that we are doing away with 35A to be more women friendly. That is not the case. I mean, it's a totally different story, but that is how and what the new norm in today's India is all about. And this new normal is not going down tomorrow or day after. The only thing Pakistan can do is that if we talk to, or we provide a position of strength to the Kashmiris, and that can only happen if we have that strength within us, economic strength, economic clout, rather than being dependent on other people. And this is not a short route. It is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort on part of the Pakistani government or governments to bring about this particular ideal. Only then can the Kashmiris actually find a viable alternative through which they can actually feel that there's a support behind them and they can fight with that confidence. And only then also the international community is going to listen to them and to us. And as for OIC, the point that Zafar Sahab had raised, I'm addressing 3 questions here, is also not going to work, because the OIC, unfortunately, the Pakistanis have too much of faith in the Muslim bloc. I'm not sounding critical, but the very fact is that the Muslim bloc has more pragmatic and economically aligned relations with India today. They are the ones who have allowed a temple to be built in UAE. I wouldn't be surprised that there's a temple being constructed very close to Makkah and Medina in Saudi Arabia pretty soon, the way things are happening. But they would not allow certain things from Pakistan to take place in UAE and otherwise. I'm not actually, I am finger pointing, but this is something that we need to realize, that emotions and rhetoric is not going to take us much far and further. That is going to definitely make the Kashmiris feel at least not abandoned, but 70 long years of not feeling abandoned is now getting fatigued. What they require is concrete action from the international community, for which Pakistan needs to start helping them from a position of strength, which is going to come only when Pakistan's economic and governance indicators become extremely good and we become self-resilient. Then we will not have anyone from either of our western or eastern flanks telling us to mind our own business or try to be aggressive against us. So this is something that we need to do as of yesterday. And I really don't think that OIC and these fora are going to provide too much of ground support to Kashmir. If they were that strong, they would have settled fair enough. This is not an Arabic space. But if they were so much into the Arabic space, they would have resolved the Palestinian issue way before looking at Kashmir. But the Palestinian issue stands where it does, and so does the Kashmiri issue. And one last point that I need to raise here is that Modi has actually been authored and scholared by Netanyahu when he said that just do what we did in Palestine, Palestinize Kashmir, and your problem is solved. And just see this one sentence totally altered the reality of the moral and legitimate reality of occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Salma.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, the next question is from Dr. Zafar Ali. In fact, I'm merging two questions, and the same question was being asked from Ms. Ayusha Han as well. Panelist views on concrete and solid suggestions for pushing the Kashmir cause in the UN system, and how can diplomatic means be intensified both at home and abroad? So anyone from the panelists or the chief guest can please answer.
I can just say two sentences about it, that whereas we should keep trying the diplomatic way, and we should keep, keep our stance morally and legally anchored. But we need to remember that this world is not being run on morality, nor it is being run on justice. You got to have two qualities in you if you really want your voice to be heard. Either you should be very useful for others, you should be beneficial for somebody, or you should be harmful for others. Unless you do not have either of these two qualities, nobody will listen to you. I'm not suggesting that please abandon all these things. I'm saying that keep doing whatever you are doing diplomatically, but raising hue and cry in the whole world that look what is happening to Kashmiris and not doing anything yourself will never work. Thank you.
Jana Masood, Aslam, would you like to say something?
Sir, I would not like to differ with Naeem Lodhi, because the point is very clear. We keep trying. We have been trying. We have been part of the Western Bloc till 1965. Till I would say till 1988, 89, when the Soviet Union finally it was dismembered. However, we weren't able to really move forward. Why? Because the geopolitical environment changed after the Sino-Indian War of the 60s, and the American interest automatically shifted towards keeping India in good humor. Later on, the economic interests have increased. So, as Lodhi is saying, where do we stand? One is positive. One is negative. Positive is your economic strength, your market, your 220 million people. Can they affect the world? Can they give something to the world back that they should really take care of us? And the negatives are, yes, you are a very vibrant society. You have strength. You have a relationship to total Muslim bloc ends at you from Pakistan right down up to the Atlantic Ocean. It's the entire Muslim bloc, and you actually could be the leader of the entire Muslim bloc. But then, we have already discussed this thing. People are more pragmatic because economic interests of every country are supreme. So we need to, I would say, raise the stakes. The Indians are not being pinched. When they were pinched, they were willing to go in for negotiations. When their arm is squeezed, in 1992, just before the Babri Masjid, they were willing to sign the agreement, pull out of Siachen. And the agreement was almost agreed over there in Delhi. And they said, no, we'll come to Lahore and we'll sign it in Lahore. It will be a greater, I would say, thing for Pakistan to project for the political leadership. And the Babri Masjid happened and they pulled out. Today, they are not willing to talk. So this is, once we really let India have a free hand, they will not listen to us. So we have to really balance it out and manage it in a manner that the only thing is we don't have to do it physically ourselves. Kulbhushan was one person, and from how he was got, how he was entrapped is a separate story. But the point is, the people who are involved in Balochistan are the people who are involved in erstwhile Fatah. They are Pakistanis. So if they are being paid by someone, well, we have to counter it in a different way. We can't say that you can't really produce an Indian out of those people who attacked our troops in Balochistan. So we have to pay back. Unless we raise the stakes, there's not going to be really worthwhile gain for the Kashmiris in the valley.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, the next question has been asked by Ms. Samin. Sir, she has said, when we talk about the option of independence, do we take into account Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan? A clarity is needed on this stance, please. Sir, she has not identified the speaker, please.
I think the UN resolutions, certainly they create and they take into account that it has to be the Pakistani part of the Kashmir, which includes plebiscite, which is a part of the plebiscite. And that's why General Lodhi has raised this proposal that we can have a partial plebiscite in Azad Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, that in order to show that we have carried out a partial plebiscite, and then we can ask for a plebiscite to be held in India as well. But of course, yes, our part of the Kashmir is a part of the plebiscite exercise prescribed by the United Nations Security Council. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
I think the question was about the option of independent
Kashmir.
And for that,
आप जरा बाद में बोलना, आप बाद में बोलना क्योंकि आप कह चुके हो, तो मैं थोड़ा सा let me handle it in a different manner. You see, the point is, Lodhi also highlighted already this thing. When we talk of independent Kashmir, he actually is saying that Pakistan should talk of the principal stance that the issue should be resolved as per the UN resolution, which talks of a plebiscite giving the right of self-determination to the residents of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which was as per the independence agreement that the states, there's not a single state in 1947 which was given an independent status. So each state either joined India or joined Pakistan. So that's what is, and the basis is there. Now you can have a plebiscite, whether it should join Pakistan or it should join India. The fact is, the times have changed. Now let me add, this is my personal opinion, the times have changed. We have been talking of various options. Unfortunately, Pakistan has been coming up with alternate solutions. The Musharraf's 4-point formula, or somebody else's before that, even Nehru and Feroz Khan Noon were almost willing to sign in their earlier times also something on Kashmir. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that we say it is the people of the Jammu and Kashmir, the residents of the state of erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir, who have to decide their future. First of all, they are under occupation over there in India. They are not letting them this chance. To counter this, Pakistan is as Lodhi is coming up, he's coming up with an alternate solution, that a partial or a provisional. It is a provisional sort of a plebiscite, that let them give a chance to decide where they are. What would be the terms and conditions of that plebiscite? That is the latest thing to be discussed. First of all, the word must come up. If the UN comes and agrees to it, at least it will be a step forward. It will be a move forward. So that's why I would say, let's not start getting into the nitty-gritty at this point in time. First, let's bring the word together at one point that yes, the people need to be given the right to self-determine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, we are running short of time, but we have a couple of more questions. So should I ask more?
We can ask last two questions.
Right, sir. So the next question is from Ms. Anna Abid. She has mentioned, as Dr. Salma mentioned, India's diplomacy is its strength. So what medium Pakistan can take for a long-term strategy on Kashmir dispute?
She asked somebody.
It was addressed to me. Diplomacy is a must. Diplomacy is a country's face. So we cannot shun diplomacy, but diplomacy cannot run alone when there is no support to that diplomacy. So we have great diplomats who are doing a great job, but a country's strength, the holistic strength, especially nowadays, and it was always the case, only happens when the package is a complete and comprehensive package. So for the longer run, Pakistan's governance, economic indicators need to be pretty decent and good to come out of this particular this situation where Pakistan asks countries to help it, rather than it should be a situation where countries line up to Pakistan to get benefits and all. Having said that, the second very important aspect, of course, is that where the diplomacy is good, it needs to be far more better. It needs to realize that the global dynamics are changing and we need to adapt to the changing realities. And another aspect of diplomacy is that in today's world, it's not only the Ministry of External Affairs or the Foreign Ministry that does the diplomacy. Diplomacy is run through several tracks. And this is not a new eureka moment that I'm unfolding here. It is an old 1960s debate by Louis Diamond and others, McDonnell and Diamond's model of multi-track diplomacy, where even citizens are diplomats. And there are several things through which diplomacy is realized. And of course, in today's world, in the fast-paced world, it's the Twitter, it's the social media, which are the tools of diplomacy. But they are not diplomacy by itself. These are good, fast-track enabling tools of diplomacy to spread the narrative. However, to date, I would also say that all of these tools would only work efficiently if there is a strong backbone and a strong DNA of the state. And the DNA of the state comes with economy, socio-political cohesion, and governance. And all of these get knit into better governance and rule of law. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Sir, the time has ended. So can you please give your concluding remarks now?
I thought you had another last question.
Yes, sir, we do have, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Sir, what effects have been created by Pakistan's policy on Kashmir, and what can be the likely impacts in the future? So this question is from Ms. Iram, and she has not identified the speaker.
Okay, is Ms. Iram there?
No, sir, she has texted that question.
Okay, okay.
I think this is a very broad question, and this today's webinar was all about that. So we cannot repeat the entire thing.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm very grateful to all the distinguished panelists, General Aslam, Masood Aslam, General Lodhi, Dr. Fatima, Salma Malik, and Ms. Maryam for their good contribution to the subject matter and bringing out very important, highlighting facts which are very important for the people of Kashmir. And I believe if those who make decisions, if they are listening to that, they'll be very much impressed with that. So with that, I beg you farewell. Thank you very much for so kind
Thank
of
you, sir.
contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir. Thank you,
Real
ma'am.
Allah
honor.
Hafiz.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.